We begin with breaking news on the aftermath of the deadly floods that devastated central Texas. As residents work to put their lives back together, there's new reporting from the New York Times that says documents reveal FEMA did not answer thousands of calls from flood survivors. They report that the agency struggled to answer calls in a timely manner because it had fired hundreds of contractors at their call centers. The Times quoting a response to their reporting from a spokesperson for the Department of Homeland Security, which oversees FEMA. Quoting here now, when a natural disaster strikes, phone calls surge and wait times can subsequently increase. Despite this expected influx, FEMA's disaster call center responded to every caller swiftly and efficiently, ensuring no one was left without assistance, end quote. The New York Times also noting that FEMA faced similar challenges in the days and weeks after Hurricane Helene and Milton hit the South. It says the data shows the agency did not answer nearly half the 500,000 plus incoming calls. The reporting comes as hundreds turned out last night in Kerrville, Texas, to honor the people killed and those still missing.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me.
CNN's Julia Vargas Jones joining us from outside the FEMA Disaster Recovery Center, set up in Kerrville, Texas. Julia, what more can you tell us?
Yeah, Fred, this is where those residents affected by the floods can come to apply for some of the benefits and help from FEMA that would not be covered for by their insurance. They also can be connected to some of these local institutions, organizations that have popped up. You know, we've seen hundreds of volunteers come together here to help their neighbors. But there's still a lot of questions and a lot of feelings about FEMA here in Kerrville, where people said that it took too long, that there are questions about how long really it took for that help to be rolled out, and echoing that reporting from the New York Times, Fred, there, where we also had, 72 hours before those teams were cleared to get here on the ground, and residents have felt that. We also learned that Kerr County officials had warned in a document to FEMA back in October of the possibility of a disaster like this one, and requested specifically that system be implemented, like sirens, for example, something that did not have and was not implemented and that could have saved hundreds of lives. This was a 200-plus page document submitted months before this tragedy, warning of exactly what could have happened.
And we're also learning that FEMA removed dozens of Camp Mystic buildings from the 100-year flood map before expansion. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so in a previous map of this flood zone here in 2011, special flood hazard area is what it's called, okay? The Camp Mystic, all of its buildings and structures were included in this. This dates back to 2011. That would have meant that the camp would have had to have flood insurance and would also be subject to more strict regulations of what it could and it could not do. But then there was an appeal in 2013. 15 different buildings were removed from that flood zone map. And then years later, in 2019, they removed another 15 structures. This is both from the original 99-year-old camp, Fred, as well as new structures built in a lake nearby. So old structures, new structures, some of them were in what is called here, and I'm quoting, flash flood alley. Now, this could have been to not have to pay for those flood insurance. They might not even have been eligible for flood insurance there. But it just paints a picture of just how dangerous this place was and how subject they were to the elements in this spot. It is striking that all of this documentation we're now uncovering, that where people knew and tried to warn authorities of what could have happened, both, from this flood area map as well as these other documents uncovered by the New York Times. All of this just shows you how people were already concerned about what could have happened.
Yeah, striking indeed. Julia Vargas Jones, thanks so much. We'll check back with you. officials are facing questions about the emergency response, including President Trump. After he toured the destruction on Friday, a reporter asked him to respond to the criticism.
Several families we've heard from are obviously upset because they say that those warnings, those alerts didn't go out in time, and they also say that people could have been saved. What do you say to those families?
Well, I think everyone did an incredible job under the circumstances. This was, I guess Christie said, a 1 in 500, 1 in 1,000 years. And I just have admiration for the job that everybody did. There's just admiration. The only bad person would ask a question like that, to be honest with you. I don't know who you are, but only a very evil person would ask a question like that.
Bloomberg White House correspondent Stephanie Lai is joining us right now. Stephanie, I mean, the president there, trying to quash criticism of the flood response. We heard that same kind of tenor and tone coming from the Texas governor when he was also making parallels to, a football game or the winning or losing end of the stick. So how was this received?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, I think since the incident happened, the administration has been doubling down that nothing out of the ordinary occurred, that the National Weather Service had responded in an adequate time. And in a lot of ways, they've been pushing this narrative to counter some of the criticisms that they've been receiving from families on the ground, from Democrats who are saying that, the way that the administration has cut the government so significantly has played a major impact in how the, state and local officials can react to, natural disasters and incidents like this. I think what's notable is that despite, the administration having issued their guidance earlier this summer that eventually ended up cutting some of FEMA's officials, that the Trump administration and Trump himself continue to say that, regardless of what's happening, most of the response on the ground should be centered on the state and local officials, and that the federal government is really just there to assist. Now, I think the trip itself was a way for Trump to show face and to provide a sense that the federal government is in place to provide help. But I think to your point and to the reporter's question, there is a lot of uncertainty as to how much the federal government is able to provide in moments like this, just given what they've already put forth in their policy.
The New York Times is reporting that thousands of calls from Texas flood victims went unanswered by FEMA call centers after Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem failed to renew contracts that expired as the flooding hit Texas. I mean, that's more bad news for the White House concerning its penchant for funding cuts. Do you see Trump backing off?
It's a little too soon to say, but I think this is definitely a wake-up call for the administration. Now, this is the second disaster that they've dealt with since he took office in this term. Earlier this year, he visited Asheville, which had happened during the transition, and then later the California wildfires. And so as these things continue to progress, we'll likely see how the administration reacts. But it seems like, based off of Trump's comments yesterday and how he's been reacting in the days since that, they're still doubling down on their sentiment that national disasters should be handled by state and local officials, and that the federal government can provide aid when necessary, but it's not, the role of FEMA. And he doesn't really see a huge role for FEMA in these circumstances.